The Therian Empire controlled 300 star systems with an iron fist that had never known mercy or hesitation in 5,000 years of conquest and domination across the galaxy. Their warships painted the stars with fear, and their soldiers wore armor that gleamed like polished obsidian under alien suns, while carrying weapons that could level cities in moments. No species had successfully resisted them in living memory, and none dared to challenge their authority when Therian patrol ships demanded tribute or obedience from the worlds they encountered. On the frontier world called New Haven, human colonists had built something beautiful among the purple forests and crystal lakes of a planet that sang with life and possibility. 200 scientists and their families lived in transparent domes that let them watch the native creatures fly through pink skies, while their children played in gardens filled with flowers from Earth and this new world. Dr. Sarah Chen worked in the xenobiology lab, while her 7-year-old daughter Maya explored the colony gardens with her friends, collecting interesting stones and watching the local butterfly creatures that glowed in the afternoon light. The human colony had been there for 3 years without incident, studying the ecosystem and sending regular reports back to Earth about the wonders they discovered on this peaceful world at the edge of explored space. Commander Vrakoth of the Therian Third Fleet grew bored with routine patrols through empty space, and decided that the human colony would provide some entertainment for his crew that day. His ship, the Merciless Talon, descended through New Haven's atmosphere with engines that roared like thunder and made the ground shake beneath the colonists' feet. The humans gathered in the main courtyard, confused but not yet afraid, as the massive warships settled onto the landing field with landing gear that crushed. The carefully tended flower beds, Vrakoth emerged in his battle armor, flanked by 20 soldiers whose weapons were already charged and humming with deadly energy. "This world now pays tribute to the Therian Empire," he announced in Galactic common tongue, his voice amplified by his helmet speakers so all could hear his declaration clearly. Colony Director James Walsh stepped forward with his hands raised in peaceful greeting, and explained that New Haven was a scientific research station under Earth's protection, and paid no tribute to anyone. "Earth," Vrakoth repeated, with amusement in his voice that made his soldiers laugh behind their helmets. "Earth recognizes no authority but its own, and joins no empire or confederation." Walsh nodded, and tried to explain that humanity preferred peaceful coexistence and mutual respect between species, rather than systems of tribute and domination. The Therian commander found this response offensive to his sense of empire, order, and proper hierarchy that demanded all lesser species bow to Therian superiority. "You will pay," Vrakoth declared, "or you will learn what happens to those who deny the Empire what it is owed." Walsh offered to contact Earth authorities to discuss trade agreements or scientific cooperation, anything that might resolve this peacefully and without conflict. Vrakoth's patience, already thin, snapped completely at what he perceived as continued disrespect from these ignorant primitives who did not know their place. "A lesson then," he said, and turned to his weapons officer with a casual gesture toward the gardens where human children still played among the flowers. Maya Chen was picking blue flowers for her mother when the energy beam struck the garden dome and turned the transparent material into a shower of molten fragments. The explosion threw her small body 20 meters through the air, and she landed in the purple grass, already gone from this world, her flowers still clutched in one hand. 6 other colonists died in that first strike, and a dozen more suffered terrible burns as Vrakoth's ship demonstrated the price of defying Therian authority. The screaming started then, parents running toward the burning garden, while the Therian soldiers kept their weapons trained on the colonists to prevent any foolish acts of revenge. Sarah Chen reached her daughter first, and collapsed beside the broken form, gathering Maya into her arms, while making sounds no parent should ever have to make. Walsh recorded everything on his personal comm unit, his hands shaking, but his training keeping him focused on documentation, even to his horror. Vrakoth surveyed the destruction with satisfaction and ordered his ship to depart, considering the lesson taught and his duty to the Empire fulfilled for another day. The merciless Talon rose into the sky on pillars of fire, leaving New Haven Colony in chaos and grief. Behind it, Sarah Chen held her daughter in the smoking ruins of the garden for an hour, before other colonists gently led her away to the medical center. Walsh sent the emergency transmission to Earth that same hour, encrypted with priority codes that would reach the Human Council within days, despite the vast distance. The message contained video footage of the attack, medical reports, and a formal request for justice against those who had murdered human civilians without provocation or warning. On Earth, the Council of Nations received Walsh's transmission in their chambers, deep beneath the Swiss mountains, where humanity made its most important decisions. They watched the footage in silence, seeing Maya Chen die again and again as they reviewed every angle and every second of the unprovoked attack. President Maria Santos closed her eyes when Maya's small form hit the ground and did not open them again for a full minute while she mastered her. "Contact the Therian Empire," she said in a voice that remained perfectly calm and measured, despite the rage that burned behind her words. "Inform them that Earth requests a formal meeting to discuss this incident." Her calm tone terrified the other council members, who knew what that particular quality of quietness meant from humanity's history. The Galactic News Network picked up the story within hours and broadcast it across known space, showing the attack and Earth's measured response. Alien species who had dealt with Therians before expressed sympathy, but expected nothing to come of it, as the Empire never apologized or paid reparations to anyone. But a few older species, those who remembered the human ships that first arrived 50 years ago and knew something of Earth's history, began to feel a cold dread. They remembered the weapon scans of those first human vessels and the technology that humanity had sealed away when they chose to join galactic civilization peacefully. They remembered that humans had nearly destroyed themselves in war so terrible that whole continents still bore the scars centuries later. And they wondered what would happen now that someone had given humanity a reason to unseal those weapons and remember what they used to be. Commander Vrakoth received a commendation from his superiors for maintaining Therian authority and felt very pleased with himself. He had no idea that he had just made the worst mistake in 5,000 years of Therian history. The galaxy held its breath and waited to see what Earth would do next. The Galactic Council chambers on Station Unity buzzed with nervous conversation as representatives from 200 species discussed the New Haven incident. Ambassador Keleth of the Vryn, whose people had sailed between stars for 10,000 years, listened to the younger species debate and felt ancient dread settle into his bones. The Zorgothi representative laughed and suggested that humans would file a formal complaint and nothing more, as was the pattern with peaceful species facing Therion aggression. "The Therions killed a child," the Mervani delegate said, with her feathers ruffled in distress. "Surely Earth will demand justice." But most agreed that demanding and receiving were different things when dealing with an empire that commanded 500 warships and had never lost a major conflict. Keleth finally stood, his aged form still commanding respect from those who knew the Vryn had witnessed the rise and fall of a dozen galactic powers. "You younglings do not understand what you are discussing," he said in a voice that carried the weight of millennia. "Attacking a human child was not a crime. It was a death sentence for the Therion Empire." The chamber fell silent, as every species turned to look at the elderly Vryn with confusion and skepticism written across their varied faces. Ambassador Thorax of the insectoid hive clicked his mandibles in disagreement and pointed out that humans had only 36 warships and had never shown military aggression. Exactly, Keleth replied, his old eyes distant with memory. They had never shown it because they chose not to, but choice and capability are very different things. He brought up holographic records from 50 years earlier, when human ships first made contact with galactic civilization, near the Andromeda Relay Station. The assembled ambassadors watched as the data showed human vessels bristling with weapon ports, sealed, and power signatures that suggested devastating capabilities. We scanned their ships thoroughly, Keleth continued. The humans were honest about their history when we asked why they carried such weapons on exploration vessels. The hologram shifted to show Earth itself, a blue and green jewel that looked peaceful from orbit, until the sensors revealed the planetary defense network. Thousands of satellites armed with kinetic weapons, laser platforms positioned on the moon, and underground facilities whose purpose the humans politely declined to explain. They told us their history, Keleth said quietly. 20 centuries of nearly constant warfare, weapons that could boil oceans, artificial plagues that killed billions, machines that fought with such fury that they poisoned whole continents. The younger species stirred uncomfortably, because this history did not match the peaceful traders and scientists they knew. Humans almost destroyed themselves a dozen times, the old Vryn continued. They fought wars over resources, ideologies, religions, and territories until their world was covered in scars. The Zorgothi representative interrupted to ask why such a violent species was allowed to join galactic society without restriction or monitoring. Keleth turned to face him, with eyes that had seen civilizations rise and fall like waves upon a shore. Because they stopped, he said simply. They looked at what they had become, and made a choice as a species to put away their weapons and seek a better path. The hologram showed Earth's united government forming, the last wars ending, and humanity's desperate rush to clean their poisoned world and heal their self-inflicted wounds. They sealed their worst weapons in vaults, Keleth explained, created laws forbidding their use, and turned their considerable talents toward exploration and cooperation instead of conquest. If this meant humans were truly peaceful now and no longer posed any danger to galactic civilization. They are peaceful, Keleth confirmed, until you give them a reason not to be, and the Pharions just gave them the worst reason imaginable. He brought up human cultural data that showed how every human society, despite their vast differences, shared certain absolute values that crossed all their divisions. Humans will forgive attacks on themselves, Keleth said. They will negotiate, compromise, and seek peaceful solutions even when wronged. But there is one line that must never be crossed. The chamber waited in tense silence for him to continue. Their children, the old Vryn said, harm a human child, and you will discover what humanity's warrior ancestors were capable of. Except now, they have 500 years of additional technological advancement. The insectoid ambassador scoffed and said that emotional attachment was a weakness, not a strength. In military matters, Keleth smiled without humor and explained that human emotion did not cloud their judgment in warfare. It focused it with terrible precision. When humans fought themselves, they were divided by ideology and culture, he said. But threaten their young, and you unite them in a way nothing else can. He shared historical records of human battles where parents defended their children, showing tactics of such ferocity that even warrior species found them disturbing. Small groups of humans fighting against overwhelming odds with weapons, tools, teeth, and bare hands, rather than let harm come to their offspring. This is biological imperative combined with technological capability, Keleth warned. The most dangerous combination in the known universe. The Galactic News Network interrupted with breaking coverage showing the human delegation arriving at the Therian homeworld for the requested formal meeting. Chen stepped off the human transport ship, wearing simple black clothing and no visible weapons, her face composed and calm. The assembled galactic representatives watched as she walked toward the Imperial Palace, flanked by two human guards who looked equally peaceful and unthreatening. "She lost her daughter in the attack," Keleth said quietly. The humans sent the child's mother to deliver their response. The younger species gasped at what seemed like emotional cruelty to send a grieving parent on such a diplomatic mission. "You still do not understand," Keleth said with something like pity in his ancient voice. "The humans did not send her despite her grief. They sent her because of it." On the Tharian homeworld, Emperor Vokrash sat on his throne of conquered worlds and prepared to receive the human delegation with amusement. His advisors had suggested taking the meeting seriously, but the Emperor saw no threat from a species with such a tiny fleet. No history of conquest. Commander Vrakoth stood at attention nearby, expecting commendation for his handling of the New Haven situation, and unconcerned about any consequences. The humans entered the throne room with quiet dignity, and Sarah Chen approached the Emperor with steady steps that neither hurried nor hesitated. "Your ship attacked New Haven Colony without provocation," she stated in Galactic Common, her voice clear and controlled. "A Therian commander murdered 7 civilians, including my 7-year-old daughter." Emperor Vokrash waved one clawed hand dismissively and explained that the colony refused to pay proper tribute to Therian authority. "We are here to present Earth's demands," Sarah continued, as if he had not spoken. "Surrender Commander Vrakoth for trial, pay full reparations to the victims' families, and issue a formal apology." The Emperor laughed, a sound like grinding stone, and his court joined in the mockery of these absurd demands. "Demands from such an insignificant species. I offer you 10,000 credits for your inconvenience," Vokrash said with feigned generosity, "and my officer acted within his authority to maintain order." Sarah Chen stood perfectly still for a long moment, and those watching from across the galaxy saw something shift in her eyes. "Then we did not come to negotiate," she said quietly. "We came to deliver an ultimatum." The laughter in the throne room died away as the humans' true purpose became clear. "You have 48 hours to meet our demands," Sarah stated. "If you refuse, Earth will respond with proportional force to the crime committed." Emperor Vokrash rose from his throne, his massive form towering over the human diplomat, and declared that the Therion Empire did not receive ultimatums from primitives. 48 hours, Sarah repeated, turned, and walked from the throne room with her guards following close behind. Departed, the Emperor called his military council and ordered the Third Fleet to proceed immediately to Earth's solar system. "Show these humans what happens when they threaten the Therian Empire," he commanded. "Destroy their orbital stations and demand their surrender." 500 warships began preparing for immediate departure, while the Emperor settled back on his throne, confident that this minor irritation would be resolved quickly. Across the galaxy, Keleth watched the proceedings and whispered a prayer to gods his people no longer believed in. "They have awakened the dragon," he said to the empty council chambers, "and they do not even know what that means." Earth received word of the Therian fleet's departure and activated protocols that had not been used since the last global conflict ended 3 centuries ago. The countdown had begun, and the galaxy would soon learn what humanity had hoped never to show them. The Therian Third Fleet moved through hyperspace toward Earth with 500 warships arranged in perfect battle formation that had conquered countless worlds. Admiral Krethix commanded the armada from his flagship, Eternal Dominion, reviewing tactical data about Earth's defenses with growing confidence in easy victory. Intelligence reports showed only 37 human military vessels in service, along with some satellites and moon-based installations that posed minimal threat. The humans have no shield technology, his tactical officer reported. Their weapons are primarily kinetic-based, which our armor easily deflects. Krethix nodded and ordered the fleet to prepare for immediate assault upon arrival, planning to destroy Earth's orbital infrastructure within the first hour. The Emperor's orders were clear: make an example of humanity so complete that no other species would dare issue ultimatums to Therian authority. Santos stood in the war room, deep beneath Geneva, where humanity's leaders gathered during their darkest moments throughout history. The last time this chamber had been active was 270 years ago, when the final human war ended and the nations chose peace over mutual destruction. Now the same screens that once tracked nuclear missiles and bioweapon deployments lit up with data about approaching alien warships. The Therian fleet will arrive in 6 hours, Defense Minister Chen reported, his voice steady, despite discussing his granddaughter's murderers. All defense protocols are active. Santos looked at the assembled leaders, who represented every human nation and settlement from Earth to the furthest colonies. We gave them a choice, she said quietly. They chose war. The vote was unanimous and swift, activating authorities that humanity had promised themselves would only be used if their species faced extinction. Hosts detected the Therian fleet's approach and transmitted final targeting data to the defense network. On Luna, the great doors of Facility 7 opened for the first time in 2 centuries, revealing launch tubes that stretched kilometers into the moon's ancient stone. In orbit above Earth, thousands of satellites that appeared on scans as simple communications relays began deploying hidden weapon systems. The human warships, so few in number, moved into position not in traditional battle formations, but in a pattern that made no sense to conventional military doctrine. Admiral Chen commanded the defense fleet from the bridge of the UHSF Indomitable, the flagship that looked small and unimpressive next to Therian dreadnoughts. All civilian traffic is clear, her tactical officer reported. Earth Defense Network confirms ready status across all platforms. Chen looked at the image of her daughter Sarah on a side screen, taken from the diplomatic mission. To the Therian homeworld. For Maya, she whispered. Then opened fleet-wide communications. All ships, you are weapons-free. Execute Protocol Omega. The Therian fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of Earth's solar system, their sensors immediately detecting the scattered human vessels. Krethix smiled beneath his helmet and ordered the fleet to advance in standard conquest formation, expecting the humans to flee or surrender. Admiral, we are detecting unusual energy signatures from the human positions, his science officer reported with confusion in his voice. Before Krethix could respond, the human ships fired their first volley, and the Therian understanding of human capabilities shattered completely. The projectiles were not simple kinetic rounds, but mass drivers accelerating tungsten rods to 0.01% of light speed. Therian shields, designed to deflect energy weapons and slow missiles, did absolutely nothing against solid metal, moving at relativistic velocity. The first 3 Therian warships simply ceased to exist as the hypersonic impacts released energy equivalent to nuclear weapons. Evasive maneuvers, Krethix shouted, but his ships were designed for formation warfare and could not scatter quickly enough. Luna's surface erupted with launch flares as thousands of autonomous drones poured into space, each one guided by artificial intelligence that humans had banned from warfare for 3 centuries. The drone swarms moved with inhuman precision, avoiding Therian fire through calculations and course corrections no living pilot could match. Each drone carried shaped charges designed to penetrate armor at specific weak points that human engineers had identified and captured Therian ship schematics. The drones struck in coordinated waves, dozens hitting each ship simultaneously at critical junctions where armor was thinnest. Explosions blossomed across the Therian formation as reactor containment failed, ammunition stores detonated, and life support systems vented atmosphere into space. Shields are ineffective, the Therian tactical officer screamed. "The projectiles are too fast and the drones are too many." Krethix ordered his ships to return fire, and thousands of energy beams lanced toward the human positions. The human vessels simply were not there when the beams arrived, having moved with engine performance that suggested radical new propulsion technology. "How are they moving that fast?" Krethix demanded, watching human ships dodge with acceleration that should have turned their crews into paste. His science officer pulled up the scan data and realized the human ships were unmanned, controlled remotely or by artificial intelligence. The humans had removed the limiting factor of biological fragility and created vessels that could maneuver beyond any living crew's endurance. Activated next, revealing weapon systems that had been disguised as solar panels and communications arrays. Particle beams, refined from human fusion research, struck Tharian ships with streams of accelerated hydrogen that burned through armor like acid through paper. Laser batteries, powered by reactors that had previously supplied Earth's cities, focused gigawatts of energy into beams that melted Tharian hulls. And the kinetic platforms, simple but terrifying in their effectiveness, dropped tungsten telephone poles from orbit with nothing but gravity for acceleration. The rods struck with such force that they punched through multiple ships if they were aligned correctly, creating casualties with elegant simplicity. Krethix watched his fleet die around him and could not comprehend how this was happening. The Tharian Empire had fought wars for 5,000 years and developed tactics that had never failed against any opponent. But the humans were not fighting like any opponent the Tharians had ever faced. There was no honor in their combat, no attempt to capture ships or preserve their own forces for future battles. The humans fought with the cold efficiency of machines designed for a single purpose: total annihilation of the enemy. Every human attack was calculated for maximum damage, every weapon deployed at the exact moment for optimal effect. "Fall back," Krethix ordered, recognizing that staying meant death for his entire fleet. But the human drones had moved to block retreat vectors, forming walls of autonomous weapons that would destroy any ship attempting to flee. The Tharian ships tried to jump to hyperspace and discovered that the humans had deployed some kind of field that prevented the necessary space-time manipulation. They were trapped in Earth's solar system, with an enemy that seemed to have anticipated every possible Tharian response. Admiral Chen watched the battle from her command center and felt no satisfaction, only grim determination to see this through. "Broadcast on all frequencies," she ordered, and her communications officer opened channels that every ship in the system would receive. Her voice echoed across the void between ships, carried by radio waves that traveled at the speed of light. "This is Admiral Chen of the United Human Space Fleet," she said. "You came here to punish Earth for daring to demand justice for murdered children." Another wave of human weapons fired, and another dozen Tharian ships exploded into debris. "Every ship you lose, every life that ends here today, is payment from Maya Chen and the others your empire killed without mercy." The humans had named their attack, and now every Tharian warrior knew they were dying for the crime of murdering one small girl. Krethix looked at his tactical display and saw that he had already lost 200 ships in less than 20 minutes. Human weapons showed no signs of depleting. The drones kept coming, and his own forces were being systematically destroyed. "Request reinforcements from the homeworld," he ordered desperately. His communications officer looked up with terror in his eyes and reported that something was blocking all long-range transmissions. The humans had cut them off completely, ensuring that no word of this battle would reach the Tharian Empire. Admiral Chen watched the Tharian fleet burn and remembered holding her granddaughter's broken body in the ruins of New Haven's garden. "Continue firing," she said quietly. "No survivors, no retreat, no mercy." The battle continued for another hour, until the last Tharian ship fell silent and drifted in pieces among thousands of its companions. 500 warships had entered Earth's solar system, expecting easy conquest. Not a single one survived to report what happened. The galaxy's largest empire had just lost its entire third fleet, without destroying a single human vessel or causing a single human casualty. And Earth had not even deployed its most terrible weapons, the ones kept sealed in deeper vaults for threats that required complete extinction. The Therian Empire would learn soon enough what happened to their fleet. But first, they would have to wonder why 500 ships simply vanished without sending any distress signals. The silence would be more terrifying than any message could have been. Emperor Vakrosh sat upon his throne, growing increasingly irritated as hours passed without word from Admiral Krethix and the Third Fleet. The attack on Earth should have concluded within the first day, followed by messages of human surrender and pleas for mercy. Instead, there was only silence from the Sol system, as if 500 warships had simply ceased to exist. "Contact the Third Fleet," the Emperor commanded for the dozenth time, his patience wearing thin with his communications officers. The same response came back. All channels to the human system remained open, but no Therion ships were responding to hails. "Perhaps the humans have some kind of jamming technology," suggested General Makthor, trying to explain the impossible silence. Emperor Vakrosh considered this possibility and ordered a scout ship to jump to the edge of Earth's system for visual reconnaissance. The scout vessel emerged from hyperspace, and its sensors immediately detected massive debris fields orbiting the human homeworld. The pilot's hands shook as he analyzed the wreckage and realized he was looking at the remains of 500 Therian warships. "My Emperor," the scout transmitted back to the homeworld, his voice breaking with fear, "the Third Fleet has been destroyed. All of it." The throne room fell into shocked silence as the impossible news spread through the Imperial Palace like wildfire. "That cannot be accurate," Vakrosh said, rising from his throne. 500 ships against their pitiful few dozen. There must be some mistake. But the scout ship sent video footage that showed vast fields of debris bearing Therian identification codes and design characteristics. Pieces of the Eternal Dominion drifted among thousands of smaller fragments, the flagship broken into sections that would never be whole again. "I detect no human wreckage," the scout reported, "only Therian ships and sensor readings suggest they were destroyed by kinetic weapons and some kind of directed energy systems." The Emperor stared at the transmitted images and felt something he had not experienced in his long reign: genuine fear. "How long did the battle last?" General Makthor asked the question everyone was thinking. The scout analyzed the debris patterns and energy signatures before responding with an answer that made no military sense. "Based on the dispersal and decay rates, I estimate the engagement lasted approximately 90 minutes, from first contact to the destruction of the last ship. 90 minutes to annihilate 500 warships. The mathematics of such destruction defied everything the Tharians knew about warfare." The Galactic News Network received the footage within hours and broadcast it across known space, with commentary that struggled to explain what had happened. Ambassador Keleth watched from his chambers on Unity Station and felt no surprise, only deep sadness for what this would mean. The younger species panicked and called emergency council sessions, demanding to know if humanity posed a threat to all galactic civilization. "They are not a threat," Keleth told the assembled ambassadors, "unless you attack their children, and then you become the threat that must be removed." The Mirvani delegate pointed out that humanity had just demonstrated military capability that exceeded even the ancient warrior species. "They always had that capability," Keleth explained patiently. "They simply chose not to use it until forced, and now the Tharians will pay the full price for forcing them." On Earth, President Santos addressed her species through broadcasts that reached every human settlement across the colonies. "The Tharion Empire sent 500 warships to punish us for demanding justice," she said calmly. "Those ships will never threaten anyone again." Pause. She did not boast or celebrate. Simply stated facts with the gravity they deserved. We did not want this war, Santos continued. We gave them every opportunity to choose peace, but they chose violence, and they chose wrong. The human population watched in silence as their leader explained that the Therian Empire now faced a choice of their own. They can surrender Commander Vrakoth, pay full reparations, and issue formal apologies, she said, or they can send more fleets and learn the same lesson until they have no fleets left to send. Earth's message was clear. Humanity would accept peace or wage total war with no middle ground between those options. Emperor Vokrash received the human transmission and felt his empire crumbling around him as subject species sensed weakness. The Karathi Confederation, long oppressed by Therian rule, declared independence and began seizing Therian garrison forces. The Nexian worlds stopped sending tribute and fortified their systems against Therian aggression. Therian retaliation that they correctly assumed would not come. We must respond, General Makthor insisted. If we show weakness now, the entire empire will collapse within weeks. But the Emperor looked at the footage of his destroyed fleet and wondered what weapons the humans had not yet deployed. What if they have worse? He asked quietly. What if the weapons that destroyed the Third Fleet are not even their most powerful? His military advisors fell silent because they had all reviewed the intelligence about Earth's history of warfare. The humans had developed weapons capable of ending all life on their planet and chose to seal them away rather than use them. If what destroyed 500 warships was not humanity's worst, then what horrors waited in those sealed vaults? Commander Vrakoth stood in the throne room and realized that his actions on New Haven had brought catastrophe upon the entire empire. My Emperor, I only did what I thought was right to maintain our authority, he said, his voice lacking its usual confidence. Vokrash looked at the officer who had killed a human child and triggered this disaster. You killed 7 civilians to make a point, the Emperor said. And now 7 million might die because of what you started. The mathematics were becoming clearer. Humanity was willing to trade Therian lives at any ratio until justice was achieved. How many more fleets do we send? Asked Admiral Threnix, the highest-ranking military officer who remained. How many more warriors do we sacrifice before we admit we cannot win? The question hung in the air because everyone in the throne room knew the answer, but none wanted to say it aloud. The Therian Empire, which had never surrendered in 5,000 years, faced an opponent that would accept nothing less than complete capitulation. We could use the world-breaker weapons, suggested one advisor, referring to the planet-killing devices that the Empire kept for extreme situations. General Makthor shook his head and explained that using such weapons would unite the entire galaxy against the Therians. Besides, he added grimly, the humans probably have equivalent weapons, and we know they are willing to use them if we escalate. Emperor Vokrash understood the trap his empire had fallen into through their own arrogance. Fighting the humans meant slow annihilation of Therian forces, but surrender meant admitting weakness to every subjugated species. Bring me Ambassador Chen, he said finally, the mother who delivered their ultimatum. His advisors protested that negotiating with humans showed weakness, but Vokrash silenced them with a gesture. Weakness is losing 500 ships and achieving nothing, he said. Wisdom is knowing when to stop digging a deeper hole. Sarah Chen received the Emperor's request for negotiations and consulted with Earth authorities before responding. Tell him I will come, she said, but this time I bring proof of what happens if he refuses our terms again. The human ship that arrived at the Therian homeworld carried Ambassador Chen and something new, a holographic display of Earth's full military capability. She entered the throne room alone this time, walking with the confidence of someone whose words were backed by absolute force. You wanted to negotiate, she said to the Emperor. So let us be clear about what you are negotiating against. The holographic display activated and showed Therian military advisors detailed scans of Earth's weapon systems. The relativistic mass drivers that could strike from beyond sensor range, the AI drone swarms that numbered in the millions, the particle beam satellites that covered every approach to Earth. And then she showed them the weapons that had not been deployed. Fusion bombs that could crack planets, biological agents that had been banned for centuries, nanomachine swarms that could disassemble matter at the molecular level. These weapons were designed to fight ourselves, Sarah explained. Humanity nearly destroyed our entire species with what you see here. The Therion leaders stared at the display and understood that they had attacked a species that had weaponized self-destruction. We put these away when we chose peace, Sarah continued. But you murdered my daughter, and forced us to remember what we can do when we choose war. Emperor Vokrash looked at the human ambassador and saw no mercy in her eyes, only iron determination. What are your terms? He asked, his voice carrying the weight of defeat. Commander Vrakov stands trial on Earth for the murder of 7 civilians, Sarah stated. Full reparations paid to the families, and a formal apology broadcast across the galaxy. She paused and added the final requirement that would change galactic politics. Forever. And the Therian Empire will sign the Galactic Protection Treaty, forbidding attacks on civilian populations of any species. The Emperor understood that accepting meant the end of Therian expansion through terror and intimidation. But refusing meant the end of the Therian Empire entirely, as humanity reduced their fleets to scrap metal. We accept your terms, Vokrash said, and with those words, 5,000 years of Therian dominance came to an end. Sarah Chen nodded once and sent the message to Earth that justice would be served. But she did not smile or celebrate, because her daughter was still gone, and no treaty could bring Maya back. 1 year after the Battle of Sol, the galaxy had transformed in ways that no species could have predicted when the Therian Third Fleet first set course for Earth. The Galactic Council met in expanded chambers to accommodate 17 new member species who had gained independence when the Therian Empire fractured. Emperor Vokrash no longer ruled an empire of 300 systems, but a confederation of 40 worlds that had chosen to remain voluntarily. The rest had broken away peacefully, knowing that Therian military power could no longer enforce submission after their fleets proved no match for human weapons. Commander Vrakov had stood trial on Earth in proceedings broadcast across known space, found guilty of 7 counts of murder, and sentenced to life imprisonment. The Therian Empire paid reparations totaling 5 billion credits to the families of New Haven, money that funded scholarships and peace initiatives across human space. Galactic Protection Treaty, signed by 130 species in the months following the battle, forbade military attacks on civilian populations. Ambassador Keleth addressed the council chambers and reflected on how much had changed since he warned the Tharians about attacking human children. We stand at the beginning of a new era, the elderly Vryn said, where might no longer makes right, and the strong protect the weak. The younger species listened with respect now, having learned that wisdom sometimes came from unexpected sources. Sarah Chen attended the council session as Earth's permanent representative, her role changing from grieving mother to architect of galactic peace. Humanity did not want to demonstrate our military capability, she told the assembled ambassadors. We hoped never to unseal those weapons, or remember what we could do. She gestured to the treaty document displayed in holographic form above the council floor. My daughter's death taught the galaxy an important lesson, Sarah continued, that peaceful species are not necessarily weak, and choosing peace is not the same as being unable to wage war. The Mervani delegate asked if humanity planned to maintain their revealed military strength or return to their previous small fleet. We will maintain sufficient forces to ensure that no species ever thinks attacking human civilians is worth the risk. Admiral Chen answered from her position in the gallery. The galaxy had seen what Earth's defenses could do, and now human ships patrolled the frontier with the authority of proven capability. But humanity had not become conquerors or used their revealed power to demand territory or tribute from other species. Instead, they offered their protection to any civilization that signed the Galactic Protection Treaty and agreed to defend all signatories equally. The Karathi Confederation, newly independent from Therian rule, was the first to request human protection and receive a squadron of Earth's unmanned warships. "We do not seek an empire," President Santos had explained when offering the protection packs. "We seek a galaxy where children of all species can grow up safely." On New Haven, the colony had rebuilt in the year since the attack, with support from dozens of species who sent aid and assistance. The garden where Maya Chen died had been transformed into a memorial park, with flowers from 200 worlds growing in carefully tended beds. Sarah Chen visited the memorial on the anniversary of the attack, walking among the alien blooms with her sister-in-law Dr. Chen, who had returned to continue her research. "Maya would have loved seeing flowers from so many different worlds," Dr. Chen said quietly, touching a blossom that glowed with bioluminescence. Sarah nodded and placed fresh earth roses at the memorial stone that bore 7 names carved in letters that would last for centuries. "Her death changed everything," Sarah said. "I wish she could have lived to see the galaxy we are building in her memory." The memorial included a simple plaque with words that had been translated into every known galactic language. Here fell Maya Chen and 6 others who never knew their deaths would end an age of conquest and begin an era of protection. Children from the colony played nearby in safe gardens while their parents worked, no longer fearing that warships would descend from the sky. The Tharian ship that approached New Haven transmitted clearance codes and requested permission to land, following protocols that had not existed a year ago. Dr. Chen tensed until she saw that it was a civilian transport carrying a delegation from the former empire. A young Tharian female emerged and approached the memorial with slow, respectful steps. "I am Nathara," she said in carefully practiced human common. "My father was Admiral Krethix, who commanded the Third Fleet." Sarah Chen stiffened but did not move away as the Tharian continued speaking. "He died believing he was serving his empire with honor," Nathara said. "I came to understand that he died for a system built on fear and violence." The young Tharian placed a crystal from her homeworld at the memorial, a gesture of respect among her people. "I cannot apologize for what was done to your daughter," Nathara continued, "but I can promise that the new generation of Tharians will never repeat our ancestors' mistakes." Sarah looked at the Tharian youth and saw genuine remorse in her eyes. "Your father followed orders from an empire that valued power over justice," Sarah replied. "You have the chance to build something better." Nathara nodded and explained that she was studying human history and philosophy, trying to understand how a species chose peace after such terrible wars. "We are not perfect." Honestly, humans still struggle with anger, prejudice, and violence, but we keep choosing to be better than our worst impulses. The conversation represented something new in galactic relations. Former enemies talking honestly about the past while building toward a different future. Across the galaxy, similar conversations were happening as species reconsidered their assumptions about strength, weakness, and what it meant to be civilized. The insectoid hive modified their expansion policies to avoid civilian areas after seeing what happened when the Tharians forgot this principle. The Zorgothi, who had laughed at human weakness a year ago, now requested human advisors to help reform their military doctrine. Ambassador Kelleth retired from council service and spent his final years writing a history of the transformation he had witnessed. "Humanity's greatest weapon was not their technology," he wrote in the introduction. It was their willingness to turn that technology away from conquest and toward protection. His final work became required reading at diplomatic academies across known space. On Earth, the war room beneath Geneva returned to standby status, with protocols sealed once again. President Santos stood in the silent chamber and remembered the day she activated weapons humanity hoped never to use. "We proved we could destroy," she said to the empty room. "Now we must prove we can protect." Earth's military academies taught new doctrines based on the Battle of Saul, overwhelming defensive capability combined with absolute restraint. Human ships trained constantly, but fired weapons only in defense of treaty partners, never in conquest or expansion. The galaxy learned that humanity meant what they said about protecting the innocent and honoring their commitments. When the Keltheran raiders attacked a Mirvani colony world, human ships arrived within hours and drove off the attackers, without pursuing into Keltheran space. "We defend, we do not conquer," Admiral Chen explained when asked why she did not press the advantage. The restraint impressed galactic observers more than the military victory, because it showed that Earth's power was matched by discipline. 5 years after Maya Chen's death, the Galactic Protection Treaty had 193 signatories, and only 2 species remained outside it. The Keltheran raiders who refused to sign found themselves isolated and unable to prey on protected colonies. And the Therian Confederation, still rebuilding their reputation, worked toward meeting the treaty requirements for full membership. Sarah Chen stood before the council and proposed expanding the treaty to include protections for refugees and displaced populations. Maya's legacy should extend beyond preventing attacks, she argued. It should include helping those who have already been harmed by violence. Proposal passed unanimously and created the Galactic Refugee Protection Force, funded by all member species. Humanity contributed ships and personnel, but insisted on shared command with other species to avoid appearing as galactic police. The balance between protection and humility became the defining characteristic of Earth's role in galactic affairs. On the 10th anniversary of the attack, New Haven Colony hosted representatives from every species to dedicate an expanded memorial. The garden had grown to cover several acres, with sections representing different aspects of galactic cooperation and peace. Maya Chen's name remained at the center, a small girl whose death had changed the course of civilizations. Sarah Chen, now retired from diplomatic service, addressed the gathered crowd with her granddaughter standing beside her. "We built this memorial not to glorify what happened," she said, "but to remember why it must never happen again." Her granddaughter, also named Maya, placed flowers at her aunt's memorial stone with small hands that trembled slightly. "My grandmother tells me that the first Maya loved flowers and wanted to be a xenobotanist," the young girl said in a clear voice. "I am studying to be the same thing," she continued. "And when I work with plants from other worlds, I will remember that my aunt's legacy made this possible." The crowd stood in respectful silence as the child finished her tribute and stepped back to her grandmother's side. Ambassador Keleth's successor, a young Vryn named Torath, spoke about how the galaxy had changed in 10 years. "We went from a place where might made right to a civilization where the strong protect the weak," he said. "And we owe that transformation to Earth's choice to respond to tragedy with justice rather than revenge." It was true that humanity could have destroyed the Therian Empire completely after the Battle of Saul, but Earth had demanded only what was just: punishment for the guilty, compensation for victims, and changes to prevent future atrocities. The measured response had earned more respect than total conquest could have achieved. Dr. Chen, still working at New Haven after all these years, dedicated a new research wing named after her daughter. "Maya wanted to understand how different species plants could grow together," she said at the ceremony. "Now students from 20 species study in this facility. The research conducted at New Haven had led to agricultural advances that fed billions across the galaxy. In an ironic twist, the colony that suffered attack had become a center of cooperation and shared knowledge. As the memorial service concluded, Sarah Chen walked through the gardens one last time before returning to Earth. She stopped at a bench overlooking the purple forests and sat quietly, remembering the daughter who never got to grow. "Did we do right by you, Maya?" she whispered to the wind. A Therian child ran past, chasing a Mirvani youth, both laughing as they played together in gardens that were safe because of what Maya's death had changed. Sarah smiled through her tears and decided that yes, they had built something worth the terrible price. The galaxy was not perfect, and never would be, but it was better than it had been. Children of all species could play together, without fearing that warships would descend from the sky. And humanity stood ready to ensure that protection continued, not through conquest or domination, but through the simple promise that harming the innocent would meet with absolute justice. The sun set over New Haven in shades of purple and gold, painting the memorial garden in light that seemed almost sacred. And in that light, the name Maya Chen would remain forever, a small girl who never knew that her death would save millions of lives. The stars.